Good to have you join us once again. The 2027 presidential candidate of the Nigerian Democratic Congress, Peter Obi, has called on Nigeria to adopt a more transparent and accountable borrowing culture, pointing to South Africa as an example of how public debt should be managed for the benefit of citizens. In a statement shared on his verified X account, Obi argued that borrowing is not inherently bad and should not be viewed as a problem on its own. Instead, he said the real issue is whether the borrowed funds are invested in productive projects that improve the lives of citizens and stimulate economic growth.
No, I didn't say we won't borrow. I will explain to Nigerians why we need to borrow and what we are going to use the money we are borrowing for.
The former Anambra State governor made the remarks while reacting to South Africa's recent $1 billion loan secured from the New Development Bank. According to him, the South African government has demonstrated a level of transparency and accountability that Nigeria should seek to emulate. Obi explained that South Africa's borrowing approach stands out because the purpose of the loan is clearly defined. The projects to be funded have been publicly identified, and citizens can easily understand the expected benefits. He stated that such openness allows the public to assess whether the government is using borrowed funds responsibly and whether the investments are delivering value to the people. He noted that borrowing can be an effective tool for development when the funds are directed towards infrastructure, healthcare, education, energy, agriculture, and other sectors capable of generating long-term economic returns. Obi stressed that many countries across the world borrow money to finance development projects and address economic challenges. However, he argued that successful borrowing depends on transparency. It depends on accountability and measurable outcomes. He stated that governments must be able to clearly demonstrate how loans are being utilized and what impact they are having on the lives of ordinary citizens. The presidential candidate expressed concern about Nigeria's rapidly increasing debt profile under the current administration. He claimed that Nigeria's total public debt has risen from approximately 87 trillion naira in 2023 to nearly 200 trillion naira within a relatively short period. While acknowledging that borrowing may sometimes be necessary, Obi questioned whether Nigerians are seeing corresponding improvements in infrastructure, security, healthcare services, electricity supply, education, and other critical sectors. He argued that many citizens are unable to identify specific projects funded through growing debt burden, raising concerns about transparency and accountability in public finance management. According to Obi, every loan obtained in the name of Nigerians should be tied to a clearly defined purpose and should contribute directly to economic development. He maintained that borrowed funds should be invested in projects that create jobs, increase productivity, reduce poverty, and improve living standards. He warned against a situation where governments continue to accumulate debt without providing clear evidence of how the funds are being utilized. Such an approach, he said, risks placing an enormous financial burden on future generations without delivering meaningful developments in the present. Obi further emphasized that good governance requires leaders to be open and accountable to the people. According to him, citizens have the right to know how money is being borrowed, the conditions attached to the loans, the projects being financed, and the results being achieved. He said governments must provide detailed explanations regarding the allocation and deployment of borrowed funds rather than expecting citizens to accept debt accumulation without questions. The former governor also linked the issue of public debt to the broader economic challenges facing Nigerians. He noted that millions of citizens are currently struggling with rising inflation, increasing food prices, unemployment, insecurity, and declining purchasing power. In such circumstances, he argued that governments must exercise greater fiscal discipline and ensure that every naira borrowed contributes directly to solving national problems. According to Obi, public borrowing should not become a routine practice that lacks strategic direction. Instead, it should be guided by a clear development plan aimed at producing measurable outcomes and improving the quality of life for citizens. He stated that governments should focus on investments that expand economic opportunities, support businesses, strengthen infrastructure, and enhance human capital development. Obi also emphasized that borrowing decisions should be evaluated based on their long-term impact on the economy. He argued that debt finance projects should generate value that exceeds the cost of the loans, ensuring that future generations inherit productive assets rather than unsustainable liabilities. According to him, responsible borrowing involves careful planning, transparent execution, and regular public reporting on progress and outcomes. The NDC presidential candidate maintained that Nigeria possesses enormous economic potential but requires prudent management of public resources to unlock sustainable growth. He suggested that improved transparency in government borrowing would help restore public confidence and encourage greater citizen participation in governance. According to Obi, trust is strengthened when governments communicate openly about financial decisions and demonstrate tangible results from public spending. He concluded by saying that every borrowing decision should answer one important question: how does it improve the life of the ordinary Nigerian? If government officials can provide a convincing answer to that question, he argued, then the borrowing may not be justified. Obi's comments have ignited public debates over Nigeria's growing debt profile and the need for greater accountability in the management of public finances. Supporters of his position argue that governments must provide more detailed information about loan-funded projects and their outcomes, while critics maintain that borrowing remains necessary to address infrastructure deficits and support economic development. As discussions continue, the issue of public debt is expected to remain a major topic in Nigeria's political and economic landscape, particularly as the country moves closer to the 2027 general elections. The debate highlights a broader question facing policymakers and citizens alike: not whether Nigeria should borrow, but whether the nation is receiving adequate value from the debts being accumulated in its name. For more information, stay engaged with News Express and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I am Cassie Tony, and many thanks for watching.